Introduction. The greatest of English dramatists except Shakespeare, the first literary dictator and poet laureate, a writer of verse, prose, satire, and criticism who most potently of all the men of his time affected the subsequent course of English letters. Such was Ben Jonson, and as such his strong personality assumes an interest to us almost unparalleled, at least in his age. Ben Jonson came of the stock that was centuries after to give to the world Thomas Carlyle. For Jonson's grandfather was of Annandale, over the Solway, whence he migrated to England. Jonson's father lost his estate under Queen Mary, having been cast into prison and forfeited. He entered the church, but died a month before his illustrious son was born, leaving his widow and child in poverty. Jonson's birthplace was Westminster, and the time of his birth early in 1573. He was thus nearly 10 years Shakespeare's junior, and less well off, if a trifle better born. But Jonson did not profit even by this slight advantage. His mother married beneath her, a wright or bricklayer, and Jonson was for a time apprenticed to the trade. As a youth, he attracted the attention of the famous antiquary, William Camden, then usher at Westminster School. And there the poet laid the solid foundations of his classical learning. Jonson always held Camden in veneration, acknowledging that to him he owed all that I am in arts, all that I know, and dedicating his first dramatic success, Every Man in His Humor, to him. It is doubtful whether Jonson ever went to either university, though Fuller says that he was statutably admitted into St. John's College, Cambridge. He tells us that he took no degree, but was later Master of Arts in both the universities by their favor, not his study. When a mere youth, Jonson enlisted as a soldier, trailing his pike in Flanders in the protracted wars of William the Silent against the Spanish. Jonson was a large and raw-boned lad. He became, by his own account, in time, exceedingly bulky. In chat with his friend William Drummond of Hawthornden, Jonson told how, in his service in the Low Countries he had, in the face of both the camps, killed an enemy and taken opima spolia from him, and how, since his coming to England, being appealed to the fields, he had killed his adversary which had hurt him in the arm and whose sword was 10 inches longer than his. Jonson's reach may have made up for the lack of his sword. Certainly his prowess lost nothing in the telling. Obviously Jonson was brave, combative, and not averse to talking of himself and his doings. In 1592, Jonson returned from abroad penniless. Soon after he married, almost as early and quite as imprudently as Shakespeare. He told Drummond curtly that his wife was a shrew, yet honest. For some years he lived apart from her in the household of Lord Albany. Yet two touching epitaphs among Jonson's epigrams, On My First Daughter and On My First Son, attest the warmth of the poet's family affections. The daughter died in infancy, the son of the plague. Another son grew up to manhood, little credit to his father whom he survived. We know nothing beyond this of Jonson's domestic life. How soon Jonson drifted into what we now call grandly, the theatrical profession, we do not know. In 1593, Marlowe made his tragic exit from life, and Greene, Shakespeare's other rival on the popular stage, had preceded Marlowe in an equally miserable death the year before. Shakespeare already had the running to himself. Jonson appears first in the employment of Philip Henslowe, the exploiter of several troupes of players, manager, and father-in-law of the famous actor, Edward Allen. From entries in Henslowe's diary, a species of theatrical account book which has been handed down to us, we know that Jonson was connected with the Admiral's men, for he borrowed £4 of Henslowe, July 28, 1597, paying back threes. 9d. On the same day on account of his share in what is not altogether clear, while later, on December 3 of the same year, Henslowe advanced 20s. To him, upon a book which he showed the plot unto the company, which he promised to deliver unto the company at Christmas next. In the next August, Jonson was in collaboration with Chettle and Porter in a play called Hot Anger Soon Cold. All this points to an association with Henslowe of some duration, as no mere tyro would be thus paid in advance upon mere promise. From allusions in Decker's play, Satyromystics, it appears that Jonson, like Shakespeare, began life as an actor, and that he ambled in a leather pitch by a play wagon, taking at one time the part of Hieronimo in Kidd's famous play, The Spanish Tragedy. By the beginning of 1598, Jonson, though still in needy circumstances, had begun to receive recognition. Francis Mearswell, known for his comparative discourse of our English poets with the Greek, Latin, and Italian poets, printed in 1598, and for his mention therein of a dozen plays of Shakespeare by title accords to Ben Jonson a place as one of our best in tragedy. A matter of some surprise, as no known tragedy of Jonson from so early a date has come down to us. That Jonson was at work on tragedy, however, is proved by the entries in Henslowe of at least 3 tragedies, now lost, in which he had a hand. These are Page of Plymouth, King Robert II, of Scotland, and Richard Crookback. But all of these came later, on his return to Henslowe, and range from August 1599 to June 1602. Returning to the autumn of 1598, an event now happened to sever, for a time, Jonson's relations with Henslowe. In a letter to Allen dated September 26 of that year, Henslowe writes, "I have lost one of my company that hurteth me greatly. That is Gabriel, for he is slain in Hogsden Fields by the hands of Benjamin Jonson, bricklayer." The last word is perhaps Henslowe's thrust at Jonson in his displeasure rather than a designation of his actual continuance at his trade up to this time. It is fair to Jonson to remark, however, that his adversary appears to have been a notorious fire-eater who had shortly before killed one Feake in a similar squabble. Dueling was a frequent occurrence of the time among gentlemen and the nobility. It was an impudent breach of the peace on the part of a player. This duel is the one which Jonson described years after to Drummond, and for it Jonson was duly arraigned at Old Bailey, tried, and convicted. He was sent to prison, and such goods and chattels as he had were forfeited. It is a thought to give one pause that, but for the ancient law permitting convicted felons to plead, as it was called, the benefit of clergy, Jonson might have been hanged for this deed. The circumstance that the poet could read and write saved him, and he received only a brand of the letter T, for Tyburn, on his left thumb. While in jail, Jonson became a Roman Catholic, but he returned to the faith of the Church of England a dozen years later. On his release, in disgrace with Henslowe and his former associates, Jonson offered his services as a playwright to Henslowe's rivals, the Lord Chamberlain's Company, in which Shakespeare was a prominent shareholder. A tradition of long standing, though not susceptible of proof in a court of law, narrates that Jonson had submitted the manuscript of Every Man in His Humour to the Chamberlain's men and had received from the company a refusal, that Shakespeare called him back, read the play himself, and at once accepted it. Whether this story is true or not, certain it is that Every Man in His Humour was accepted by Shakespeare's company and acted for the first time in 1598, with Shakespeare taking a part. The evidence of this is contained in the list of actors prefixed to the comedy in the folio of Jonson's works, 1616. But it is a mistake to infer, because Shakespeare's name stands first in the list of actors and the elder Nawell first in the dramatis personae, that Shakespeare took that particular part. The order of a list of Elizabethan players was generally that of their importance or priority as shareholders in the company and seldom, if ever, corresponded to the list of characters. Every Man in His Humour was an immediate success, and with it Jonson's reputation as one of the leading dramatists of his time was established once and for all. This could have been by no means Jonson's earliest comedy, and we have just learned that he was already reputed one of our best in tragedy. Indeed, one of Jonson's extant comedies, The Case is Altered, but one never claimed by him or published as his, must certainly have preceded Every Man in His Humour on the stage. The former play may be described as a comedy modeled on the Latin plays of Plautus. It combines, in fact, situations derived from the Captivy and the aulularia of that dramatist. But the pretty story of the beggar maiden, Rachel, and her suitors, Jonson found, not among the classics, but in the ideals of romantic love which Shakespeare had already popularized on the stage. Jonson never again produced so fresh and lovable a feminine personage as Rachel, although in other respects, The Case is Altered is not a conspicuous play, and, save for the satirizing of Antony Munday in the person of Antonio Balladino and Gabriel Harvey as well, is perhaps the least characteristic of the comedies of Jonson. Every Man in His Humour, probably first acted late in the summer of 1598, and at the curtain, is commonly regarded as an epoch-making play, and this view is not unjustified. As to plot, it tells little more than how an intercepted letter enabled a father to follow his supposedly studious son to London, and there observe his life with the gallants of the time. The real quality of this comedy is in its personages and in the theory upon which they are conceived. Ben Jonson had theories about poetry and the drama, and he was neither chary in talking of them nor in experimenting with them in his plays. This makes Jonson, like Dryden in his time, and Wordsworth much later, an author to reckon with, particularly when we remember that many of Jonson's notions came for a time definitely to prevail and to modify the whole trend of English poetry. First of all, Jonson was a classicist. That is, he believed in restraint and precedent in art, in opposition to the prevalent ungoverned and irresponsible Renaissance spirit. Jonson believed that there was a professional way of doing things which might be reached by a study of the best examples, and he found these examples for the most part among the ancients. To confine our attention to the drama, Jonson objected to the amateurishness and haphazard nature of many contemporary plays, and set himself to do something different. And the first and most striking thing that he evolved was his conception and practice of the comedy of humors. As Jonson has been much misrepresented in this matter, let us quote his own words as to humor. A humor, according to Jonson, was a bias of disposition, a warp, so to speak, in character by which some one peculiar quality doth so possess a man, that it doth draw all his affects, his spirits, and his powers in their confluxions, all to run one way. But continuing, Jonson is careful to add, but that a rook by wearing a pied feather, the cable hat band, or the three-piled ruff, a yard of shoe tie, or the Switzer's knot on his French garters should affect a humor. Oh, it is more than most ridiculous. Jonson's comedy of humors, in a word, conceived of stage personages on the basis of a ruling trait or passion, a notable simplification of actual life, be it observed in passing, and, placing these typified traits in juxtaposition in their conflict and contrast, struck the spark of comedy. Downright, as his name indicates, is a plain squire. Bobadil's humor is that of the braggart who is incidentally, and with delightfully comic effect, a coward. Brainworm's humor is the finding out of things to the end of fooling everybody. Of course he is fooled in the end himself. But it was not Jonson's theories alone that made the success of Every Man in His Humor. The play is admirably written, and each character is vividly conceived, and with a firm touch based on observation of the men of the London of the day. Jonson was neither in this, his first great comedy, nor in any other play that he wrote, a supine classicist, urging that English drama return to a slavish adherence to classical conditions. He says as to the laws of the old comedy, meaning by laws, such matters as the unities of time and place and the use of chorus. I see not then, but we should enjoy the same license or free power to illustrate and heighten our invention as they did, and not be tied to those strict and regular forms which the niceness of a few, who are nothing but form, would thrust upon us. Every Man in His Humor is written in prose, a novel practice which Jonson had of his predecessor in comedy, John Lyly. Even the word humor seems to have been employed in the Johnsonian sense by Chapman before Jonson's use of it. Indeed, the comedy of humors itself is only a heightened variety of the comedy of manners, which represents life, viewed at a satirical angle, and is the oldest and most persistent species of comedy in the language. Nonetheless, Jonson's comedy merited its immediate success and marked out a definite course in which comedy long continued to run. To mention only Shakespeare's Falstaff and his rout, Bardolph, Pistol, Dame Quickly, and the rest, whether in Henry IV or in The Merry Wives of Windsor, all are conceived in the spirit of humors. So are the captains, Welsh, Scotch, and Irish of Henry V, and Malvolio especially later, though Shakespeare never employed the method of humors for an important personage. It was not Jonson's fault that many of his successors did precisely the thing that he had reprobated, that is, degrade the humor into an oddity of speech, an eccentricity of manner, of dress, or cut of beard. There was an anonymous play called Every Woman in Her Humor. Chapman wrote A Humorous Day's Mirth, humor out of breath, Fletcher later, the humorous lieutenant, and Jonson, besides every man out of his humor, returned to the title in closing the cycle of his comedies in The Magnetic Lady or Humors Reconciled. With the performance of Every Man Out of His Humor, in 1599, by Shakespeare's company once more at the Globe, we turn a new page in Jonson's career. Despite his many real virtues, if there is one feature more than any other that distinguishes Jonson, it is his arrogance. And to this may be added his self-righteousness, especially under criticism or satire. Every Man Out of His Humor is the first of 3 comical satires, which Jonson contributed to what Dekker called the poetamecia, or War of the Theatres as recent critics have named it. This play as a fabric of plot is a very slight affair, but as a satirical picture of the manners of the time, proceeding by means of vivid caricature, couched in witty and brilliant dialogue, and sustained by that righteous indignation which must lie at the heart of all true satire as a realization. In short, of the classical ideal of comedy there had been nothing like Jonson's comedy since the days of Aristophanes. Every Man in His Humor, like the 2 plays that follow it, contains 2 kinds of attack, the critical or generally satiric, leveled at abuses and corruptions in the abstract, and the personal, in which specific application is made of all this in the lampooning of poets and others, Jonson's contemporaries. The method of personal attack by actual caricature of a person on the stage is almost as old as the drama. Aristophanes so lampooned Euripides in the Acharnians and Socrates in the Clouds, to mention no other examples, and in English drama, this kind of thing is alluded to again and again. What Jonson really did was to raise the dramatic lampoon to an art and make out of a casual burlesque and bit of mimicry a dramatic satire of literary pretensions and permanency. With the arrogant attitude mentioned above and his uncommon eloquence in scorn, vituperation, and invective, it is no wonder that Jonson soon involved himself in literary and even personal quarrels with his fellow authors. The circumstances of the origin of this poetamecia are far from clear, and those who have written on the topic, except of late, have not helped to make them clearer. The origin of the war has been referred to satirical references, apparently to Jonson, contained in The Scourge of Villainy, a satire in regular form after the manner of the ancients by John Marston, a fellow playwright, subsequent friend and collaborator of Jonson's. On the other hand, epigrams of Jonson have been discovered, 49, 68, and 100, variously charging playwright, reasonably identified with Marston, with scurrility, cowardice, and plagiarism, though the dates of the epigrams cannot be ascertained with certainty. Jonson's own statement of the matter to Drummond runs: he had many quarrels with Marston, beat him, and took his pistol from him, wrote his poetaster on him. The beginning of them were that Marston represented him on the stage. The best account of this whole subject is to be found in the edition of Poetaster and Satyromestrix by J. A. Penniman in Bell's Letters series, shortly to appear. See also his earlier work, The War of the Theatres, 1892, and the excellent contributions to the subject by H. 100. Hart in Notes and Queries, and in his edition of Jonson, 1906. Here at least we are on certain ground, and the principles of the quarrel are known. Histriomystix, a play revised by Marston in 1598, has been regarded as the one in which Jonson was thus represented on the stage. Although the personage in question, Chrysigonus, a poet, satirist, and translator, poor but proud and contemptuous of the common herd, seems rather a complimentary portrait of Jonson than a caricature. As to the personages actually ridiculed in Every Man Out of His Humor, Carlo Buffon was formerly thought certainly to be Marston, as he was described as a public, scurrilous, and profane jester, and elsewhere as the grand scourge or second untruss of the time. Joseph Hall being by his own boast the first, and Marston's work being entitled The Scourge of Villainy. Apparently, we must now prefer for Carlo a notorious character named Charles Chester, of whom gossipy and inaccurate Aubrey relates that he was a bold, impertinent fellow, a perpetual talker, and made a noise like a drum in a room. So one time at a tavern, Sir Walter Raleigh beats him and seals up his mouth, that is his upper and nether beard, with hard wax. From him, Ben Jonson takes his Carlo Buffon in Every Man and His Humor. Is it conceivable that after all Jonson was ridiculing Marston, and that the point of the satire consisted in an intentional confusion of the grand scourge or second untruss, with the scurrilous and profane Chester? We have digressed into detail in this particular case to exemplify the difficulties of criticism in its attempts to identify the allusions in these forgotten quarrels. We are on sounder ground of fact in recording other manifestations of Jonson's enmity. In the cases altered, there is clear ridicule in the character Antonio Balladino of Anthony Munday, pageant poet of the city, translator of romances and playwright as well. In Every Man and His Humor, there is certainly a caricature of Samuel Daniel, accepted poet of the court, sonneteer, and companion of men of fashion. These men held recognized positions to which Jonson felt his talents better entitled him. They were hence to him his natural enemies. It seems almost certain that he pursued both in the personages of his satire through Every Man out of His Humor, and Cynthia's Revels, Daniel under the characters Fastidious, Brisk, and Hedon, Munday as Puntarvolo and Amorphous. But in these last we venture on quagmire once more. Jonson's literary rivalry of Daniel is traceable again and again, in the entertainments that welcomed King James on his way to London, in the masques at court, and in the pastoral drama. As to Jonson's personal ambitions with respect to these two men, it is notable that he became, not pageant poet, but chronologer to the city of London, and that, on the accession of the new king, he came soon to triumph over Daniel as the accepted entertainer of royalty. Cynthia's Revels, the second comical satire, was acted in 1600, and as a play is even more lengthy, elaborate, and impossible than Every Man out of His Humor. Here personal satire seems to have absorbed everything, and while much of the caricature is admirable, especially in the detail of witty and trenchantly satirical dialogue, the central idea of a fountain of self-love is not very well carried out, and the persons revert at times to abstractions, the action to allegory. It adds to our wonder that this difficult drama should have been acted by the children of Queen Elizabeth's chapel. Among them, Nathaniel Field, with whom Jonson read Horace and Martial, and whom he taught later how to make plays. Another of these precocious little actors was Salathiel Pavey, who died before he was 13, already famed for taking the parts of old men. Him Jonson immortalized in one of the sweetest of his epitaphs. An interesting sidelight is this on the character of this redoubtable and rugged satirist, that he should thus have befriended and tenderly remembered these little theatrical waifs, some of whom, as we know, had been literally kidnapped to be pressed into the service of the theater and whipped to the conning of their difficult parts. To the caricature of Daniel and Munday in Cynthia's Revels must be added Aeneid's impudence, here assuredly Marston, and Asatis, the prodigal, interpreted as Lodge or, more perilously, Raleigh. Critz, like a spermacillent in Every Man out of His Humor, is Jonson's self-complacent portrait of himself, the just, wholly admirable, and judicious scholar, holding his head high above the pack of the yelping curs of envy and detraction, but careless of their puny attacks on his perfections with only too mindful a neglect. The third and last of the comical satires is Poetaster, acted, once more, by the children of the chapel in 1601, and Jonson's only avowed contribution to the fray. According to the author's own account, this play was written in 15 weeks on a report that his enemies had entrusted to Dekker the preparation of satyromystics, the untrussing of the humorous poet, a dramatic attack upon himself. In this attempt to forestall his enemies, Jonson succeeded, and Poetaster was an immediate and deserved success. While hardly more closely knit in structure than its earlier companion pieces, Poetaster is planned to lead up to the ludicrous final scene in which, after a device borrowed from the Lexiphanes of Lucian, the offending Poetaster, Marston Crispinus, is made to throw up the difficult words with which he had overburdened his stomach as well as overlarded his vocabulary. In the end, Crispinus, with his fellow, Dekker Demetrius, is bound over to keep the peace and never thenceforward malign, traduce, or detract the person or writings of Quintus Horatius Flaccus or any other eminent man transcending you in merit. One of the most diverting personages in Jonson's comedy is Captain Tucka. His peculiarity has been well described by Ward as a buoyant blackguardism, which recovers itself instantaneously from the most complete exposure, and a picturesqueness of speech like that of a walking dictionary of slang. It was this character, Captain Tucka, that Dekker hit upon in his reply, satirical, and he amplified him, turning his abusive vocabulary back upon Jonson and adding an immodesty to his dialogue that did not enter into Jonson's conception. It has been held, altogether plausibly, that when Dekker was engaged professionally, so to speak, to write a dramatic reply to Jonson, he was at work on a species of chronicle history, dealing with the story of Walter Tyrrell in the reign of William Rufus. This he hurriedly adapted to include the satirical characters suggested by poetaster, and fashioned to convey the satire of his reply. The absurdity of placing Horace in the court of a Norman king is the result. But Dekker's play is not without its palpable hits at the arrogance, the literary pride, and self-righteousness of Jonson Horace, whose ningle or pal, the absurd Asinius Bubo, has recently been shown to figure forth, in all likelihood, Jonson's friend, the poet Drayton. Slight and hastily adapted as is satirical, especially in a comparison with the better wrought and more significant satire of poetaster, the town awarded the palm to Dekker, not to Jonson, and Jonson gave over in consequence his practice of comical satire. Though Jonson was cited to appear before the Lord Chief Justice to answer certain charges to the effect that he had attacked lawyers and soldiers in poetaster, nothing came of this complaint. It may be suspected that much of this furious clatter and give and take was pure playing to the gallery. The town was agog with the strife, and on no less an authority than Shakespeare, Hamlet, Roman II. 2. We learn that the Children's Company, acting the plays of Jonson, did so berattle the common stages, that many, wearing rapiers, are afraid of goosequills and dare scarce come thither. Several other plays have been thought to bear a greater or less part in the War of the Theatres. Among them, the most important is a college play, entitled The Return from Parnassus, dating 1601-02. In it, a much-quoted passage makes Burbage, as a character, declare, "Why, here's our fellow Shakespeare puts them all down, I and Ben Jonson too. Oh, that Ben Jonson is a pestilent fellow. He brought up Horace, giving the poets a pill, but our fellow Shakespeare hath given him a purge that made him bewray his credit." Was Shakespeare then concerned in this war of the stages? And what could have been the nature of this purge? Among several suggestions, Troilus and Cressida has been thought by some to be the play in which Shakespeare thus put down his friend Jonson. A wiser interpretation finds the purge in satirical, which, though not written by Shakespeare, was staged by his company, and therefore with his approval and under his direction as one of the leaders of that company. The last years of the reign of Elizabeth thus saw Jonson recognized as a dramatist second only to Shakespeare, and not second even to him as a dramatic satirist. But Jonson now turned his talents to new fields. Plays on subjects derived from classical story and myth had held the stage from the beginning of the drama, so that Shakespeare was making no new departure when he wrote his Julius Caesar about 1600. Therefore, when Jonson staged Sejanus 3 years later, and with Shakespeare's company once more, he was only following in the elder dramatist's footsteps. But Jonson's idea of a play on classical history, on the one hand, and Shakespeare's and the elder popular dramatists on the other, were very different. Heywood some years before had put 5 straggling plays on the stage in quick succession, all derived from stories in Ovid and dramatized with little taste or discrimination. Shakespeare had a finer conception of form, but even he was contented to take all his ancient history from North's translation of Plutarch and dramatize his subject without further inquiry. Jonson was a scholar and a classical antiquarian. He reprobated this slipshod amateurishness and wrote his Sejanus like a scholar, reading Tacitus, Suetonius, and other authorities to be certain of his facts, his setting, and his atmosphere, and somewhat pedantically noting his authorities in the margin when he came to print. Sejanus is a tragedy of genuine dramatic power, in which is told with discriminating taste the story of the haughty favorite of Tiberius, with his tragical overthrow. Our drama presents no truer nor more painstaking representation of ancient Roman life than may be found in Jonson's Sejanus and Catiline his Conspiracy, which followed in 1611. A passage in the address of the former play to the reader, in which Jonson refers to a collaboration in an earlier version, has led to the surmise that Shakespeare may have been that worthier pen. There is no evidence to determine the matter. In 1605, we find Jonson in active collaboration with Chapman and Marston in the admirable comedy of London life entitled Eastward Ho! In the previous year, Marston had dedicated his Malcontent, in terms of fervid admiration, to Jonson, so that the wounds of the War of the Theatres must have been long since healed. Between Jonson and Chapman, there was the kinship of similar scholarly ideals. The two continued friends throughout life. Eastward Ho! Achieved the extraordinary popularity represented in A Demand for 3 issues in 1 year. But this was not due entirely to the merits of the play. In its earliest version, a passage which an irritable courtier conceived to be derogatory to his nation, the Scots, sent both Chapman and Jonson to jail, but the matter was soon patched up, for by this time Jonson had influence at court. With the accession of King James, Jonson began his long and successful career as a writer of masques. He wrote more masques than all his competitors together, and they are of an extraordinary variety and poetic excellence. Jonson did not invent the masque, for such premeditated devices to set and frame, so to speak. A court ball had been known and practiced in varying degrees of elaboration long before his time. But Jonson gave dramatic value to the masque, especially in his invention of the anti-masque, a comedy or farcical element of relief entrusted to professional players or dancers. He enhanced, as well, the beauty and dignity of those portions of the masque in which noble lords and ladies took their parts to create, by their gorgeous costumes and artistic grouping and evolutions, a sumptuous show. On the mechanical and scenic side, Jonson had an inventive and ingenious partner in Inigo Jones, the royal architect, who more than any one man raised the standard of stage representation in the England of his day. Jonson continued active in the service of the court in the writing of masques and other entertainments far into the reign of King Charles. But towards the end, a quarrel with Jones embittered his life, and the two testy old men appear to have become not only a constant irritation to each other, but intolerable bores at court. In Hymene, The Mask of Queens, Love freed from ignorance, Lovers made men, Pleasure reconciled to virtue, and many more will be found Jonson's aptitude, his taste, his poetry and inventiveness in these biforms of the drama. While in The Mask of Christmas, and The Gypsies Metamorphosed especially, is discoverable that power of broad comedy which, at court as well as in the city, was not the least element of Jonson's contemporary popularity. But Jonson had by no means given up the popular stage when he turned to the amusement of King James. In 1605, Volpone was produced, The Silent Woman in 1609, The Alchemist in the following year. These comedies, with Bartholomew Fair, 1614, represent Jonson at his height, and for constructive cleverness, character successfully conceived in the manner of caricature, wit, and brilliancy of dialogue, they stand alone in English drama. Volpone, or The Fox, is, in a sense, a transition play from the dramatic satires of the War of the Theatres to the purer comedy represented in the plays named above. Its subject is a struggle of wit applied to chicanery, for among its dramatis personae from the villainous Fox himself, his rascally servant Mosca, Voltur, the Vulture, Corbaxio and Corvino, the Big and the Little Raven, to Sir Politic Woodby and the rest, there is scarcely a virtuous character in the play. Question has been raised as to whether a story so forbidding can be considered a comedy. For, although the plot ends in the discomfiture and imprisonment of the most vicious, it involves no mortal catastrophe. But Jonson was on sound historical ground, for Volpone is conceived far more logically on the lines of the ancients' theory of comedy than was ever the romantic drama of Shakespeare. However repulsive we may find a philosophy of life that facilely divides the world into the rogues and their dupes, and, identifying brains with roguery and innocence with folly, admires the former while inconsistently punishing them. The Silent Woman is a gigantic farce of the most ingenious construction. The whole comedy hinges on a huge joke, played by a heartless nephew on his misanthropic uncle, who is induced to take to himself a wife, young, fair, and warranted silent, but who, in the end, turns out neither silent nor a woman at all. In The Alchemist, again, we have the utmost cleverness in construction. The whole fabric building climax on climax, witty, ingenious, and so plausibly presented that we forget its departures from the possibilities of life. In The Alchemist, Jonson represented, none the less to the life, certain sharpers of the metropolis, reveling in their shrewdness and rascality and in the variety of the stupidity and wickedness of their victims. We may object to the fact that the only person in the play possessed of a scruple of honesty is discomfited, and that the greatest scoundrel of all is approved in the end and rewarded. The comedy is so admirably written and contrived, the personages stand out with such lifelike distinctness in their several kinds, and the whole is animated with such verve and resourcefulness that The Alchemist is a new marvel every time it is read. Lastly of this group comes the tremendous comedy Bartholomew Fair, less clear-cut, less definite, and less structurally worthy of praise than its three predecessors, but full of the keenest and cleverest of satire and inventive to a degree beyond any English comedy save some other of Jonson's own. It is in Bartholomew Fair that we are presented to the immortal caricature of the Puritan, Zealand the land busy, and the little wits that group about him, and it is in this extraordinary comedy that the humor of Jonson, always open to this danger, loosens into the Rabelaisian mode that so delighted King James in The Gypsies Metamorphosed. Another comedy of less merit is The Devil is an Ass, acted in 1616. It was the failure of this play that caused Jonson to give over writing for the public stage for a period of nearly 10 years. Volpone was laid as to scene in Venice. Whether because of the success of Eastward Ho or for other reasons, the other three comedies declare in the words of the prologue to The Alchemist, "Our scene is London, 'cause we would make known no country's mirth is better than our own." Indeed, Jonson went further when he came to revise his plays for collected publication in his folio of 1616. He transferred the scene of every man in his humor, from Florence to London also, converting Signor Lorenzo di Pazzi to Old Nawell, Prospero to Master Wellborn, and Hesperida to Dame Kitely, dwelling I the old jury. In his comedies of London life, despite his trend towards caricature, Jonson has shown himself a genuine realist, drawing from the life about him with an experience and insight rare in any generation. A happy comparison has been suggested between Ben Jonson and Charles Dickens. Both were men of the people, lowly born and hardly bred. Each knew the London of his time as few men knew it, and each represented it intimately and in elaborate detail. Both men were at heart moralists, seeking the truth by the exaggerated methods of humor and caricature. Perverse, even wrong-headed at times, but possessed of a true pathos and largeness of heart. And when all has been said, though, the Elizabethan ran to satire, the Victorian to sentimentality, leaving the world better for the art that they practiced in it. In 1616, the year of the death of Shakespeare, Jonson collected his plays, his poetry, and his masques for publication in a collective edition. This was an unusual thing at the time, and had been attempted by no dramatist before Jonson. This volume published in a carefully revised text all the plays thus far mentioned, excepting The Case is Altered, which Jonson did not acknowledge, Bartholomew Fair, and The Devil is an Ass, which was written too late. It included likewise a book of some 130-odd epigrams, in which form of brief and pungent writing Jonson was an acknowledged master. The Forest, a smaller collection of lyric and occasional verse, and some 10 masques and entertainments. In this same year, Jonson was made poet laureate with a pension of 100 marks a year. This, with his fees and returns from several noblemen, and the small earnings of his plays, must have formed the bulk of his income. The poet appears to have done certain literary hackwork for others, as, for example, parts of the Punic Wars contributed to Raleigh's History of the World. We know from a story, little to the credit of either, that Jonson accompanied Raleigh's son abroad in the capacity of a tutor. In 1618, Jonson was granted the reversion of the office of Master of the Revels, a post for which he was peculiarly fitted, but he did not live to enjoy its perquisites. Jonson was honored with degrees by both universities, though when and under what circumstances is not known. It has been said that he narrowly escaped the honor of knighthood, which the satirists of the day averred King James was wont to lavish with an indiscriminate hand. Worse men were made knights in his day than worthy Ben Jonson. From 1616 to the close of the reign of King James, Jonson produced nothing for the stage. But he prosecuted what he calls his wonted studies with such assiduity that he became in reality, as by report, one of the most learned men of his time. Jonson's theory of authorship involved a wide acquaintance with books and an ability, as he put it, to convert the substance or riches of another poet to his own use. Accordingly, Jonson read not only the Greek and Latin classics down to the lesser writers, but he acquainted himself especially with the Latin writings of his learned contemporaries, their prose as well as their poetry, their antiquities and curious lore as well as their more solid learning. Though a poor man, Jonson was an indefatigable collector of books. He told Drummond that the Earl of Pembroke sent him £20 every first day of the new year to buy new books. Unhappily, in 1623, his library was destroyed by fire, an accident serio-comically described in his witty poem, An Execration upon Vulcan. Yet even now a book turns up from time to time in which is inscribed, in fair large Italian lettering, the name Ben Jonson. With respect to Jonson's use of his material, Dryden said memorably of him, was not only a professed imitator of Horace, but a learned plagiary of all the others. You track him everywhere in their snow, but he has done his robberies so openly that one sees he fears not to be taxed by any law. He invades authors like a monarch, and what would be theft in other poets is only victory in him. And yet, it is but fair to say that Jonson prided himself, and justly, on his originality. In Catiline, he not only uses Sallust's account of the conspiracy, but he models some of the speeches of Cicero on the Roman orator's actual words. In Poetaster, he lifts a whole satire out of Horace and dramatizes it effectively for his purposes. The sophist Libanius suggests the situation of the silent woman, a Latin comedy of Giordano Bruno, Il Candeleo, the relation of the dupes and the sharpers in The Alchemist, the Mostellaria of Plautus, its admirable opening scene. But Jonson commonly bettered his sources, and putting the stamp of his sovereignty on whatever bullion he borrowed made it thenceforward to all time current and his own. The lyric, and especially the occasional poetry of Jonson, has a peculiar merit. His theory demanded design and the perfection of literary finish. He was furthest from the rhapsodist and the careless singer of an idle day, and he believed that Apollo could only be worthily served in singing robes and laurel-crowned. And yet many of Jonson's lyrics will live as long as the language. Who does not know queen and huntress, chaste and fair? Drink to me only with thine eyes, or still to be neat, still to be dressed. Beautiful in form, deft and graceful in expression, with not a word too much or one that bears not its part in the total effect. There is yet about the lyrics of Jonson a certain stiffness and formality, a suspicion that they were not quite spontaneous and unbidden, but that they were carved, so to speak, with disproportionate labor by a potent man of letters whose habitual thought is on greater things. It is for these reasons that Jonson is even better in the epigram and in occasional verse where rhetorical finish and pointed wit less interfere with the spontaneity and emotion which we usually associate with lyrical poetry. There are no such epitaphs as Ben Jonson's. Witness the charming ones on his own children, on Salathiel Pavey, the child actor, and many more. And this even though the rigid law of mine and thine must now restore to William Brown of Tavistock the famous lines beginning, underneath this sable hearse. Jonson is unsurpassed, too, in the difficult poetry of compliment, seldom falling into fulsome praise and disproportionate similitude, yet showing again and again a generous appreciation of worth in others, a discriminating taste, and a generous personal regard. There was no man in England of his rank so well known and universally beloved as Ben Jonson. The list of his friends, of those to whom he had written verses, and those who had written verses to him, includes the name of every man of prominence in the England of King James. And the tone of many of these productions discloses an affectionate familiarity that speaks for the amiable personality and sound worth of the laureate. In 1619, growing unwieldy through inactivity, Jonson hit upon the heroic remedy of a journey afoot to Scotland. On his way thither and back, he was hospitably received at the houses of many friends and by those to whom his friends had recommended him. When he arrived in Edinburgh, the burgesses met to grant him the freedom of the city, and Drummond, foremost of Scottish poets, was proud to entertain him for weeks as his guest at Hawthornden. Some of the noblest of Jonson's poems were inspired by friendship. Such is the fine Ode to the Memory of Sir Lucius Carey and Sir Henry Morrison, and that admirable piece of critical insight and filial affection, prefixed to the first Shakespeare folio, to the memory of my beloved master, William Shakespeare, and what he hath left us, to mention only these. Nor can the earlier epode, beginning not to know vice at all, be matched in stately gravity and gnomic wisdom in its own wise and stately age. But if Jonson had deserted the stage after the publication of his folio, and up to the end of the reign of King James, he was far from inactive. For year after year, his inexhaustible inventiveness continued to contribute to the masking and entertainment at court. In the Golden Age restored, Pallas turns the Iron Age with its attendant evils into statues which sink out of sight. In Pleasure reconciled to virtue, Atlas figures represented as an old man, his shoulders covered with snow, and Camus, the god of cheer or the belly, is one of the characters, a circumstance which an imaginative boy of 10 named John Milton was not to forget. Pan's Anniversary, late in the reign of James, proclaimed that Jonson had not yet forgotten how to write exquisite lyrics, and The Gypsies Metamorphosed displayed the old drollery and broad humorous stroke still unimpaired and unmatchable. These, too, and the earlier years of Charles were the days of the Apollo Room of the Devil Tavern, where Jonson presided, the absolute monarch of English literary Bohemia. We hear of a room blazoned about with Jonson's own judicious, legs convivials in letters of gold, of a company made up of the choicest spirits of the time, devotedly attached to their veteran dictator, his reminiscences, opinions, affections, and enmities. And we hear, too, of valorous potations, but in the words of Herrick addressed to his master, Jonson, at the Devil Tavern, as at the Dog, the Triple Tun, and at the Mermaid. We such clusters had as made us nobly wild, not mad, and yet each verse of thine outdid the meat, outdid the frolic wine. But the patronage of the court failed in the days of King Charles, though Jonson was not without royal favors, and the old poet returned to the stage, producing, between 1625 and 1633, the staple of news, The New Inn, The Magnetic Lady, and The Tale of a Tub, the last doubtless revised from a much earlier comedy. None of these plays met with any marked success, although the scathing generalization of Dryden that designated them, Jonson's dotages, is unfair to their genuine merits. Thus the idea of an office for the gathering, proper dressing, and promulgation of news, wild flight of the fancy in its time, was an excellent subject for satire on the existing absurdities among newsmongers, although as much can hardly be said for the Magnetic Lady, who, in her bounty, draws to her personages of differing humors to reconcile them in the end according to the alternative title, or Humors Reconciled. These last plays of the old dramatist revert to caricature and the hard lines of allegory. The moralist is more than ever present. The satire degenerates into personal lampoon, especially of his sometime friend, Inigo Jones, who appears unworthily to have used his influence at court against the broken-down old poet. And now disease claimed Jonson, and he was bedridden for months. He had succeeded Middleton in 1628 as chronologer to the City of London, but lost the post for not fulfilling its duties. King Charles befriended him and even commissioned him to write still for the entertainment of the court, and he was not without the sustaining hand of noble patrons and devoted friends among the younger poets who were proud to be sealed of the tribe of Ben. Jonson died August 6, 1637, and a second folio of his works, which he had been some time gathering, was printed in 1640, bearing in its various parts dates ranging from 1630 to 1642. It included all the plays mentioned in the foregoing paragraphs, excepting The Case is Altered. The Masks, some 15, that date between 1617 and 1630. Another collection of lyrics and occasional poetry called Underwoods, including some further entertainments. A translation of Horace's Art of Poetry, also published in a vicesimo quarto in 1640, and certain fragments and ingatherings which the poet would hardly have included himself. These last comprise the fragment, less than 70 lines of a tragedy called Mortimer His Fall, and 3 acts of a pastoral drama of much beauty and poetic spirit, The Sad Shepherd. There is also the exceedingly interesting English grammar, made by Ben Jonson for the benefit of all strangers out of his observation of the English language now spoken and in use, in Latin and English, and Timber, or Discoveries, made upon men and matter as they have flowed out of his daily reading, or had their reflux to his peculiar notion of the times. The Discoveries, as it is usually called, is a commonplace book such as many literary men have kept, in which their reading was chronicled, passages that took their fancy translated or transcribed, and their passing opinions noted. Many passages of Jonson's Discoveries are literal translations from the authors he chanced to be reading, with the reference, noted or not, as the accident of the moment prescribed. At times he follows the line of Machiavelli's argument as to the nature and conduct of princes. At others, he clarifies his own conception of poetry and poets by recourse to Aristotle. He finds a choice paragraph on eloquence in Seneca the Elder and applies it to his own recollection of Bacon's power as an orator, and another on facile and ready genius, and translates it, adapting it to his recollection of his fellow playwright, Shakespeare. To call such passages which Jonson never intended for publication plagiarism is to obscure the significance of words. To disparage his memory by citing them is a preposterous use of scholarship. Jonson's prose, both in his dramas, in the descriptive comments of his masks, and in the Discoveries, is characterized by clarity and vigorous directness, nor is it wanting in a fine sense of form or in the subtler graces of diction. When Jonson died, there was a project for a handsome monument to his memory. But the Civil War was at hand, and the project failed. A memorial, not insufficient, was carved on the stone covering his grave in one of the aisles of Westminster Abbey. O rare Ben Jonson. Felixe. Schelling. The College. Philadelphia, USA. To the lady most deserving her name and blood. Lady Mary Ross. Madam, in the age of sacrifices, the truth of religion was not in the greatness and fat of the offerings, but in the devotion and zeal of the sacrificers. Else what could a handle of gums have done in the sight of a hecatomb? Or how might I appear at this altar, except with those affections that no less love the light and witness than they have the conscience of your virtue? If what I offer bear an acceptable odor and hold the first strength, it is your value of it, which remembers where, when, and to whom it was kindled. Otherwise, as the times are, there comes rarely forth that thing so full of authority or example, but by assiduity and custom grows less, and loses. This yet safe in your judgment, which is a Sidney's, is forbidden to speak more, lest it talk or look like one of the ambitious faces of the time, who, the more they paint, are the less themselves. Your ladyship's true honorer. Ben Jonson. To the reader. If thou beest more, thou art an understander, and then I trust thee. If thou art one that takest up, and but a pretender, beware of what hands thou receivest thy commodity. For thou wert never more fair in the way to be cozened, than in this age, in poetry, especially in plays. Wherein, now the concupiscence of dances and of antics so reigneth, as to run away from nature, and be afraid of her, is the only point of art that tickles the spectators. But how out of purpose and place do I name art? When the professors are grown so obstinate contemners of it, and presumers on their own naturals, as they are deriders of all diligence that way, and, by simple mocking at the terms, when they understand not the things, think to get off wittily with their ignorance. Nay, they are esteemed the more learned, and sufficient for this by the many, through their excellent vice of judgment. For they commend writers, as they do fencers or wrestlers, who if they come in robustuously, and put for it with a great deal of violence, are received for the braver fellows, when many times their own rudeness is the cause of their disgrace, and a little touch of their adversary gives all that boisterous force the foil. I deny not, but that these men, who always seek to do more than enough, may sometime happen on something that is good and great, but very seldom, and when it comes it doth not recompense the rest of their ill. It sticks out perhaps and is more eminent because all is sordid and vile about it, as lights are more discerned in a thick darkness than a faint shadow. I speak not this, out of a hope to do good to any man against his will. For I know, if it were put to the question of theirs and mine, the worse would find more suffrages, because the most favor common errors. But I give thee this warning, that there is a great difference between those that, to gain the opinion of copy, utter all they can, however unfitly, and those that use election and a mean. For it is only the disease of the unskilful, to think rude things greater than polished, or scattered more numerous than composed. Argument. He sickness hot, a master quit, for fear is house in town, and left one servant there. Ass him corrupted, and gave means to know. A cheater and his punk, who now brought low 50 eving their narrow practice, were become 100 ozenas at large, and only wanting some hus to set up, with him they here contract, for a share, and all begin to act. 1,000 company they draw, and much abuse, casting figures, telling fortunes, news, elling of flies, flat bawdry with the stone illit, and they, and all in fume are gone. Prologue. Fortune, that favors fools these 2 short hours, we wish away, both for your sakes and ours, judging spectators, and desire in place to the author justice, to ourselves but grace. Our scene is London, 'cause we would make known, no country's mirth is better than our own. No clime breeds better matter for your whore, bawd, squire, impostor, many persons more, whose manners, now called humours, feed the stage, and which have still been subject for the rage or spleen of comic writers. Though this pen did never aim to grieve, but better men, howe'er the age he lives in doth endure the vices that she breeds, above their cure. But when the wholesome remedies are sweet, and in their working gain and profit meet, he hopes to find no spirit so much diseased, but will with such fair correctives be pleased, for here he doth not fear who can apply. If there be any that will sit so nigh unto the stream, to look what it doth run, they shall find things, they'd think or wish were done, they are so natural follies, but so shewn, as even the doers may see, and yet not own. ACT 1. Scene 1.1. A room in Lovewit's house. Enter Face in a captain's uniform, with his sword drawn, and subtle with a vile, quarreling and followed by Dol Common. Face. Believe I will. Sub. Thy worst. I fart at thee. Dol. Have you your wits? Why, gentlemen? For love. Face. Sirrah, I'll strip you. Sub. What to do? Lick figs out at my. Face. Rogue, rogue out of all your sleights. Dol. Nay, look ye, sovereign general, are you madmen? Sub. Oh, let the wild sheep loose. I'll gum your silks with good strong water, and you come. Dol. Will you have the neighbors hear you? Will you betray all? Hark. I hear somebody. Face. Sirrah. Sub. I shall mar all that the tailor has made, if you approach. Face. You most notorious whelp, you insolent slave, dare you do this? Sub. Yes, faith, yes, faith. Face. Why, who am I, my mongrel? Who am I? Sub. I'll tell you, since you know not yourself. Face. Speak lower, rogue. Sub. Yes, you were once times not long past, the good, honest, plain, livery 3-pound thrum, that kept your master's worship's house here in the Friars for the vacations. Face. Will you be so loud? Sub. Since by my means, translated suburb captain. Face. By your means, Dr. Dog. Sub. Within man's memory, all this I speak of. Face. Why, I pray you, have I been countenanced by you, or you by me? Do but collect, sir, where I met you first. Sub. I do not hear well. Vase. Not of this, I think it. But I shall put you in mind, sir. At Pie Corner, taking your meal of steam in from cook's stalls, where, like the father of hunger, you did walk piteously costive, with your pinch-torn nose, and your complexion of the Roman wash stuck full of black and melancholic worms, like powder corns shot at the artillery yard. Sub. I wish you could advance your voice a little. Vase. When you went pinned up in the several rags you had raked and picked from dunghills, before day your feet in mouldy slippers for your kibes, a felt of rug, and a thin threaden cloak, that scarce would cover your no buttocks. Sub. So, sir. Vase. When all your alchemy and your algebra, your minerals, vegetals, and animals, your conjuring, cozening, and your dozen of trades could not relieve your core with so much linen would make you tinder, but to see a fire. I gave you countenance, credit for your coals, your stills, your glasses, your materials, built you a furnace, drew you customers, advanced all your black arts, lent you, beside, a house to practice in. Sub. Your master's house. Vase. Where you have studied the more thriving skill of bawdy since. Sub. Yes, in your master's house. You and the rats here kept possession. Make it not strange. I know you were one could keep the buttery hatch still locked, and save the chippings, sell the Dole beer to aquavity men, the which, together with your Christmas veils at post and pair, your letting out of counters made you a pretty stock, some 20 marks, and gave you credit to converse with cobwebs, here, since your mistress, death hath broke up house. Vase. You might talk softlier, rascal. Sub. No, you scarab, I'll thunder you in pieces. I will teach you how to beware to tempt a fury again that carries tempest in his hand and voice. Vase. The place has made you valiant. Sub. No, your clothes. Thou vermin, have I tanned thee out of dung, so poor, so wretched, when no living thing would keep thee company but a spider or worse. Raised thee from brooms and dust and watering pots, sublimed thee and exalted thee, and fixed thee in the third region called our state of grace. Wrought thee to spirit, to quintessence, with pains would twice have won me the philosopher's work. Put thee in words and fashion, made thee fit for more than ordinary fellowships. Given thee thy oaths, thy quarreling dimensions, thy rules to cheat at horse race, cockpit, cards, dice, or whatever gallant tincture else. Made thee a second in mine own great art. And have I this for thanks? Do you rebel, do you fly out in the projection? Would you be gone now? Dol. Gentlemen, what mean you? Will you mar all? Sub. Slave, thou hadst had no name. Dol. Will you undo yourselves with civil war? Sub. Never been known, past equiclibinum, the heat of horse-dung, underground, in cellars, or an alehouse darker than deaf John's, been lost to all mankind but laundresses and tapsters, had not I been. Dol. Do you know who hears you, sovereign? Vase. Sirrah. Dol. Nay, general, I thought you were civil. Vase. I shall turn desperate, if you grow thus loud. Sub. And hang thyself, I care not. Vase. Hang thee, collier, and all thy pots and pans in picture I will, since thou hast moved me. Dol. Oh, this will o'erthrow all. Vase. Write thee up bod and palls, have all thy tricks of cozening with a hollow coal, dust, scrapings, searching for things lost, with a sieve and shears, erecting figures in your rows of houses, and taking in of shadows with a glass told in red letters, and a face cut for thee worse than Gamaliel Ratsies. Dol. Are you sound? Have you your senses, masters? Vase. I will have a book, but barely reckoning thy impostures, shall prove a true philosopher's stone to printers. Sub. Away, you trencher rascal. Vase. Out, you dog leech. The vomit of all prisons. Dol. Will you be your own destructions, gentlemen? Vase. Still spewed out for lying too heavy on the basket. Sub. Cheater. Vase. Bawd. Sub. Cowherd. Vase. Conjurer. Sub. Cut purse. Vase. Which? Dol. Oh me. We are ruined, lost. Have you no more regard to your reputations? Where's your judgment? Slight, have yet some care of me, of your republic. Vase. Away this brack. I'll bring thee, rogue within the statute of sorcery, tricesimo tertio of Harry the Eighth. Ay, and perhaps thy neck within a noose, for laundering gold and barbing it. Dol. You'll bring your head within a coxcomb, will you? And you, sir, with your menstrue gather it up. Death, you abominable pair of stinkards, leave off your barking and grow one again, or, by the light that shines, I'll cut your throats. I'll not be made a prey unto the marshal, for ne'er a snarling dog-bolt of you both. Have you together cozened all this while, and all the world, and shall it now be said, you've made most courteous shift to cozen yourselves? You will accuse him. You will bring him in within the statute, who shall take your word. A whoreson, upstart, apocryphal captain, whom not a Puritan in Blackfriars will trust so much as for a feather, and you, too, will give the cause, forsooth. You will insult, and claim a primacy in the divisions. You must be chief. As if you only had the powder to project with, and the work were not begun out of equality. The venture tripartite. All things in common. Without priority. As death. You perpetual curs fall to your couples again and cozen kindly, and heartily and lovingly as you should, and lose not the beginning of a term. Or, by this hand, I shall grow factious too, and take my part and quit you. Vase. 'Tis his fault, he ever murmurs and objects his pains, and says, the weight of all lies upon him. Sub. Why, so it does. Dol. How does it? Do not we sustain our parts? Sub. Yes, but they are not equal. Dol. Why, if your part exceed today, I hope ours may, tomorrow match it. Sub. Eyes they may. Dol. May murmuring mastiff. Eyes and do. Death on me. Help me to throttle him. Sub. Dorothy. Mistress Dorothy. Odds precious, I'll do anything. What do you mean? Dol. Because, oh, your fermentation and sebation. Sub. Not I by heaven. Dol. Your Sol and Luna help me. Sub. Would I were hanged then. I'll conform myself. Dol. Will you, sir? Do so then and quickly, swear. Sub. What should I swear? Dol. To leave your faction, sir, and labor kindly in the common work. Sub. Let me not breathe if I meant aught beside. I only used those speeches as a spur to him. Dol. I hope we need no spurs, sir. Do we? Vase. Slid prove today who shall shark best. Sub. Agreed. Dol. Yes, and work close and friendly. Sub. Slight, the knot shall grow the stronger for this breach with me. Dol. Why so, my good baboons? Shall we go make a sort of sober, scurvy, precise neighbors, that scarce have smiled twice since the king came in, a feast of laughter at our follies? Rascals would run themselves from breath to see me ride, or you have but a hole to thrust your heads in, for which you should pay ere rent. No agree. And may Don Provost ride a feasting long, in his old velvet jerkin and stained scarfs, my noble sovereign and worthy general, ere we contribute a new cruel garter to his most worsted worship. Sub. Royal Dol. Spoken like Claridiana and thyself. Vase. For which at supper thou shalt sit in triumph, and not be styled Dol Common, but Dol proper, Dol singular. The longest cut at night shall draw thee for his Dol particular. Sub. Who's that? One rings. To the window, Dol. Pray heaven, the master do not trouble us this quarter. Vase. Oh, fear not him. While there dies one a week the plague, he's safe, from thinking toward London. Beside, he's busy at his hop yards now. I had a letter from him. If he do, he'll send such word for airing of the house, as you shall have sufficient time to quit it, though we break up a fortnight, 'tis no matter. Sub. Who is it, Dol? Dol. A fine young quadling. Vase. Oh, my lawyer's clerk, I lighted on last night, in Holborn at the Dagger. He would have, I told you of him, a familiar, to rifle with at horses and win cups. Dol. Oh, let him in. Sub. Stay. Who shall dot? Vase. Get your robes on, I will meet him as going out. Dol. And what shall I do? Vase. Not be seen, away. Seem you very reserved. Sub. Enough. Vase. God be why you, sir, I pray you let him know that I was here, his name is Dapper. I would gladly have stayed, but… Dapt. Captain, I am here. Vase. Who's that? He's come, I think, doctor. Good faith, sir, I was going away. Dap. In truth, I am very sorry, Captain. Vase. But I thought sure I should meet you. Dap. I am very glad. I had a scurvy writ or two to make, and I had lent my watch last night to one that dines today at the sheriff's, and so was robbed of my pastime. Is this the cunning man? Vase. This is his worship. Dap. Is he a doctor? Vase. Yes. Dap. And have you broke with him, Captain? Vase. Aye. Dap. And how? Vase. Faith, he does make the matter, sir, so dainty I know not what to say. Dap. Not so, good Captain. Vase. Would I were fairly rid of it, believe me. Dap. Nay, now you grieve me, sir. Why should you wish so? I dare assure you, I'll not be ungrateful. Vase. I cannot think you will, sir. But the law is such a thing, and then he says, reads matter falling so lately. Dap. Read. He was an ass, and dealt, sir, with a fool. Vase. It was a clerk, sir. Dap. A clerk. Vase. Nay, hear me, sir. You know the law better, I think. Dap. I should, sir, and the danger. You know I showed the statute to you. Vase. You did so. Dap. And will I tell then? By this hand of flesh, would it might never write good court-hand more if I discover. What do you think of me, that I am a chias? Vase. What's that? Dap. The Turk was here. As one would say, do you think I am a Turk? Vase. I'll tell the doctor so. Dap. Do, good sweet Captain. Vase. Come, noble doctor, pray thee let's prevail. This is the gentleman, and he is no chias. Sub. Captain, I have returned you all my answer. I would do much, sir, for your love, but this I neither may nor can. Vase. Tut, do not say so. You deal now with a noble fellow, doctor, one that will thank you richly, and he is no chias, let that, sir, move you. Sub. Pray you, forbear. Vase. He has 4 angels here. Sub. You do me wrong, good sir. Vase. Doctor, wherein? To tempt you with these spirits. Sub. To tempt my art and love, sir, to my peril. For heaven, I scarce can think you are my friend, that so would draw me to apparent danger. Vase. I draw you. A horse draw you and a halter, you and your flies together. Dap. Nay, good Captain. Vase. That know no difference of men. Sub. Good words, sir. Vase. Good deeds, sir, Dr. Dogsmeat. Slight, I bring you no cheating climb the cluffs or clarables that look as big as 5 and 50, and flush, and spit out secrets like hot custard. Dap. Captain. Vase. Nor any melancholic underscribe shall tell the vicar. But a special gentle, that is the heir to 40 marks a year, consorts with the small poets of the time, is the sole hope of his old grandmother, that knows the law and writes you 6 fair hands, is a fine clerk, and has his ciphering perfect. Will take his oath the Greek Testament, if need be, in his pocket, and can court his mistress out of Ovid. Dap. Nay, dear Captain. Vase. Did you not tell me so? Dap. Yes, but I'd have you use Master Doctor with some more respect. Vase. Hang him, proud stag, with his broad velvet head. But for your sake, I'd choke, ere I would change an article of breath with such a puckfist. Come, let's be gone. Sub. Pray you let me speak with you. Zap. His worship calls you captain. Vase. I am sorry I embarked myself in such a business. Zap. Nay, good sir, he did call you. Vase. Will he take then? Sub. First hear me. Vase. Not a syllable, less you take. Sub. Pray you, sir. Vase. Upon no terms but an assumpsit. Sub. Your humor must be law. Vase. Why now, sir, talk? Now I dare hear you with mine honor. Speak. So may this gentleman too. Sub. Why, sir? Vase. No whispering. Sub. For heaven, you do not apprehend the loss you do yourself in this. Vase. Wherein? For what? Sub. Marry, to be so importunate for one, that, when he has it, will undo you all, he'll win up all the money in the town. Vase. How? Sub. Yes, and blow up gamester after gamester, as they do crackers in a puppet play. If I do give him a familiar, give you him all you play for, never set him, for he will have it. Vase. You are mistaken, doctor. Why he does ask one but for cups and horses, a rifling fly, none of your great familiars. Zap. Yes, captain, I would have it for all games. Sub. I told you so. Vase. Slight, that is a new business. I understood you, a tame bird, to fly twice in a term, or so, on Friday nights, when you had left the office, for a nag of 40 or 50 shillings. Zap. I, 'tis true, sir, but I do think now I shall leave the law, and therefore. Vase. Why, this changes quite the case. Do you think that I dare move him? Zap. If you please, sir, all's one to him, I see. Vase. What? For that money? I cannot with my conscience, nor should you make the request, methinks. Zap. No, sir, I mean to add consideration. Vase. Why then, sir, I'll try, say that it were for all games, doctor. Sub. I say then, not a mouth shall eat for him at any ordinary, but on the score, that is a gaming mouth, conceive me. Vase. Indeed. Sub. He'll draw you all the treasure of the realm, if it be set him. Vase. Speak you this from art? Sub. I, sir, and reason too, the ground of art. He is of the only best complexion, the queen of fairy loves. Vase. What? Is he? Sub. Peace. He'll overhear you. Sir, should she but see him. Vase. What? Sub. Do not you tell him. Vase. Will he win at cards too? Sub. The spirits of dead Holland, living Isaac you'd swear, were in him, such a vigorous luck as cannot be resisted. Slight, he'll put 6 of your gallants to a cloak, indeed. Vase. A strange success, that some man shall be born to. Sub. He hears you, man. Zap. Sir, I'll not be ingrateful. Vase. Faith, I have confidence in his good nature. You hear, he says he will not be ingrateful. Sub. Why, as you please, my venture follows yours. Vase. Troth, do it, doctor, think him trusty and make him. He may make us both happy in an hour, win some £5,000, and send us to on't. Zap. Believe it, and I will, sir. Vase. And you shall, sir. You have heard all. Zap. No, what wast? Nothing, I, sir. Vase. Nothing. Zap. A little, sir. Vase. Well, a rare star reigned at your birth. Zap. At mine, sir. No. Vase. The doctor swears that you are. Sub. Nay, captain, you'll tell all now. Vase. Allied to the queen of fairy. Zap. Who? That I am. Believe it, no such matter. Vase. Yes, and that you were born with a caul on your head. Zap. Who says so? Vase. Come, you know it well enough, though you dissemble it. Zap. I fac I do not, you are mistaken. Vase. How? Swear by your fac, and in a thing so known unto the doctor. How shall we, sir, trust you in the other matter? Can we ever think, when you have won 5 or 6,000 pound, you'll send us shares in't by this rate? Zap. By Jove, sir, I'll win 10,000 pound and send you half. I fax no oath. Sub. No, he did but jest. Vase. Go to. Go thank the doctor, he's your friend to take it so. Zap. I thank his worship. Vase. So. Another angel. Zap. Must I? Vase. Must you? Slight, what else is thanks? Will you be trivial, doctor, when must he come for his familiar? Zap. Shall I not have it with me? Sub. Oh, good sir. There must a world of ceremonies pass. You must be bathed and fumigated first. Besides, the Queen of Fairy does not rise till it be noon. Vase. Not if she danced tonight. Sub. And she must bless it. Vase. Did you never see her royal grace yet? Zap. Whom? Vase. Your Anna Fairy. Sub. Not since she kissed him in the cradle, Captain. I can resolve you that. Vase. Well, see her grace, whate'er it cost you, for a thing that I know. It will be somewhat hard to compass, but however, see her. You are made, believe it, if you can see her. Her grace is a lone woman and very rich, and if she take a fancy, she will do strange things. See her at any hand. Slid, she may hap to leave you all she has, it is the doctor's fear. Zap. How wilt be done then? Vase. Let me alone, take you no thought. Do you but say to me, Captain, I'll see her grace. Zap. Captain, I'll see her grace. Vase. Enough. Sub. Who's there? Anon. Conduct him forth by the back way, sir, against 1 o'clock prepare yourself, till when you must be fasting, only take 3 drops of vinegar in at your nose, 2 at your mouth, and 1 at either ear, then bathe your fingers' ends and wash your eyes to sharpen your 5 senses and cry hum thrice, and then buzz as often, and then come. Vase. Can you remember this? Zap. I warrant you. Vase. Well then, away. It is but your bestowing some 20 nobles, mong her grace's servants, and put on a clean shirt. You do not know what grace her grace may do you in clean linen. Sabe. Come in. Good wives, I pray you forbear me now. Troth, I can do you no good till afternoon. What is your name, say you? Able drugger. Drug. Yes, sir. Sub. A seller of tobacco. Drug. Yes, sir. Sub. Free of the grocers. Drug. I an't please you. Sub. Well, your business, able. Drug. This an't please your worship. I am a young beginner, and am building of a new shop, an't like your worship, just at corner of a street. Here is the plot on't, and I would know by art, sir, of your worship, which way I should make my door by necromancy, and where my shelves, and which should be for boxes, and which for pots. I would be glad to thrive, sir, and I was wished to your worship by a gentleman, one Captain Face, that says you know men's planets, and their good angels and their bad. Sub. I do, if I do see them. Vase. What? My honest Abel. Though art well met here. Drug. Troth, sir, I was speaking, just as your worship came here, of your worship. I pray you speak for me to Master Doctor. Vase. He shall do anything, doctor, do you hear? This is my friend, Abel, an honest fellow. He lets me have good tobacco, and he does not sophisticate it with sackleys or oil, nor washes it in muscatel and grains, nor buries it in gravel, underground, wrapped up in greasy leather or pissed clouts, but keeps it in fine lily pots that opened smell like conserve of roses or French beans. He has his maple block, his silver tongs, Winchester pipes, and fire of juniper, a neat, spruce, honest fellow and no goldsmith. Sub, he is a fortunate fellow, that I am sure on. Vase, already, sir, have you found it? Lo thee able. Sub, and in right way toward riches. Vase, sir. Sub, this summer he will be of the clothing of his company, and next spring called to the scarlet, spend what he can. Vase, what and so little beard? Sub, sir, you must think, he may have a receipt to make hair come, but he'll be wise, preserve his youth and fine fort, his fortune looks for him another way. Vase, slid doctor, how canst thou know this so soon? I am amused at that. Sub, by a rule, captain in metaposcopy, which I do work by, a certain star in the forehead which you see not. Your chestnut or your olive-colored face does never fail, and your long ear doth promise. I note by certain spots, too, in his teeth, and on the nail of his mercurial finger. Vase, which finger's that? Sub, his little finger. Look, you were born upon a Wednesday. Drug, yes, indeed, sir. Sub, the thumb in chiromancy, we give Venus, the forefinger to Jove, the midst to Saturn, the ring to Sol, the least to Mercury, who was the lord, sir, of his horoscope, his house of life being Libra, which foreshowed he should be a merchant and should trade with balance. Vase, why this is strange. Is it not, honest Nab? Sub, there is a ship now coming from Ormus that shall yield him such a commodity of drugs. This is the west and this the south. Drug, yes, sir. Sub, and those are your two sides. Drug, aye, sir. Sub, make me your door then, south, your broadside, west, and on the east side of your shop aloft write Mathlai, Tarmiel, and Baraborat, upon the north part, Rail, Velil, Thiel. They are the names of those mercurial spirits that do fright flies from boxes. Drug, yes, sir. Sub, and beneath your threshold, bury me a lodestone to draw in gallants that wear spurs. The rest, they'll seem to follow. Vase, that's a secret, Nab. Sub, and on your stall, a puppet, with a vice and a court fucus to call city dames, you shall deal much with minerals. Drug, sir, I have. At home already. Sub, I know you have arsenic, vitriol, sal tartar, argil, alkali cinnabar. I know all this fellow, captain, will come in time to be a great distiller, and give a say I will not say directly, but very fair at the philosopher's stone. Vase, why how now, Abel? Is this true? Drug, good captain, what must I give? Vase, nay, I'll not counsel thee. Thou hear'st ye what wealth, he says, spend what thou canst, thou it like to come to. Drug, I would gie him a crown. Vase, a crown, and toward such a fortune. Heart, thou shalt rather gie him thy shop. No gold about thee. Drug, yes, I have a poor dig, I have kept this half year. Vase, out on thee, Nab. Slight, there was such an offer shalt keep no longer, I'll give it him for thee. Doctor, Nab prays your worship to drink this, and swears he will appear more grateful, as your skill does raise him in the world. Drug, I would entreat another favor of his worship. Vase, what is't, Nab? Drug, but to look over, sir, my almanac, and cross out my ill days, that I may neither bargain nor trust upon them. Vase, that he shall now believe it shall be done, gainst afternoon. Sub, and a direction for his shelves. Vase, now, Nab, art thou well pleased, Nab? Drug, thanks, sir, both your worships. Vase, away. Why now, you smoky persecutor of nature? Now do you see that something's to be done beside your beach coal and your corsive waters, your crosslets, crucibles, and cucurbits? You must have stuff brought home to you, to work on, and yet you think I am at no expense in searching out these veins, then following them, then trying them out. For God, my intelligence costs me more money than my share oft comes to in these rare works. Sub, you are pleasant, sir. How now? What says my dainty Dalkin? Dol. Yonder fishwife will not away. And there's your giantess, the bawd of Lambeth. Sub. Heart, I cannot speak with them. Dol. Not a forenight, I have told them in a voice thorough the trunk, like one of your familiars. But I have spied Sir Epicure Mammon. Sub. Where? Dol. Coming along, at far end of the lane, slow of his feet, but earnest of his tongue to one that's with him. Sub. Face go you and shift. Dol, you must presently make ready too. Dol. Why, what's the matter? Sub. Oh, I did look for him with the sun's rising. Marvel he could sleep. This is the day I am to perfect for him the magisterium, our great work, the stone, and yield it made into his hands, of which he has, this month, talked as he were possessed. And now he's dealing pieces on away. Methinks I see him entering ordinaries, dispensing for the pox and plaguey houses, reaching his dose, walking moorfields for lepers, and offering citizens' wives' pomander bracelets as his preservative made of the elixir, searching the spittle to make old bawds young, and the highways for beggars to make rich. I see no end of his labors. He will make nature ashamed of her long sleep, when art, who's but a stepdame, shall do more than she in her best love to mankind ever could. If his dream lasts, he'll turn the age to gold.